Hello guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. So in this video we will learn about basics of class based component and some basics of functional based components, and we will also look into the difference between these two component practices. So basically what we mean by class based component and functional based component is how we design it. Like both follow the different structure, both have its own perks. We will look like how we can differentiate between these two. So prior to 16.8, like which released react hooks in react, which made functional components also a stateful component, prior to that 16.8 the classes were only the stateful component in react, which means like the only way to track the life cycle of a component is using the class based approach. But after the react hooks comes into the picture, the functional based components also are now stateful, and there is equivalent methods which were present in class based component which is now present in the functional based component. So let's look into the differences between the both of these. So in functional components it is simple, like we have a normal function which will return some JSX element. Here JSX means JavaScript XML elements, which is like uh, what we say, like which looks like a HTML, but inside of the, but actually it is some JSX. So which is understand by your browser, and it can internally converts all those things, okay, and renders your content to the user, okay. Whereas in class based components we just have to extend a class, we just have to extend the class from react, and we have to explicitly mention the render method which is used to return some JSX element. So to manage the state in the functional component we use the react hooks, which is new and which is very much helpful in today's world, okay. So everything that is building in react is using functional based components, and using of hooks has made the development of the new web applications faster and easier. Whereas class based component is used, like we just have to explicitly mention this dot state and create a particular state. Most of the support project in industries are still using the class based components, so we just have to like know the difference when we have to use what functional based components on when we have to use the class based components. It is like it depends on you, like if you want to use the functional based components or if you want to use the class based components. So where there are various methods, various lifecycle method included in both of these designs. There is use state, use effect, use ref, use memo, etc. in functional based component, and in similar class based components have component did mount, component will unmount, component did update, which is like its own lifecycle methods. So to pass the data we have the props and functional components, and which has passed as the parameter to the function. Whereas in class based components we just have to use this keyword to like access the particular object, and from that object we have to access its props. So there is no, in functional components there is no like a render method within which we mentioned within the function body. Okay, so the render method is like in class based components we have to explicitly mention it, and which will return some JSX element. Whereas functional components is simple and clear, whereas class based components is like very much harder to read all those things. We just have to maintain a lot of unnecessary things over in class based components. So in practice also, like functional components is better than the class based components. So let's look at the hooks over here. So we will just talk about very short. So in class based component we have component did mount. So what does it mean? For example, when my component is initially rendered, like when it renders to the screen, there will be a component did mount function which which will be run with every render to the screen. So it will run only one time when there will be a render to the UI. Okay. So similarly we have the use effect as well. So we have different number of life cycle methods and all those things that we can use according to our need. So let's look at some example between the class based components and functional based components, how it is. So let's go to VS Code. Okay, so I already created a dummy project. Okay, app.js and some component folder I created. Let's create a class based component. So I will create a new file. I will say example.js file. So basically I just have to import react from react. I will just use component as well. Okay, let's create a class. How to create a class based component? Use the term class, name of the class based component. Here example. The usually syntax of creating a naming convention should be the capital E, and when it is for example name, then just put it like this, or you can put it like this. Okay, it's up to you. Class extends, I will extend the super class, which is our component class. This component class is coming from react. We have the render method. Okay, which will return some JSX. So to return some JSX we have to use div. So I am returning just empty pairs of HTML elements, which is like a div. It could be a paragraph, it could be an empty. It won't, the compiler will not complain about this. Let's just put it into a div. So let's create a some simple count function. Okay, let me just create a count function. You clicked okay, you clicked on something JSX, you click this much times, and I will create a button as well which will say click me. I am just making a counter method. Okay, let's call the constructor means every time this will be called, I am passing some initial props to it. Okay, so I'm calling super with these props. Okay, I'm calling super props. I'm creating a whenever this component is created, it should have internal state of count. I think 0. Okay, let's create another function which will be handle click function, okay, which will just update the set state method. So we are updating the state. I am just saying now count should be okay, let's call let it will have some callback function to update it, let's say previous state. Okay, which will return me a new object count. Okay, which will be previous state, previous count value plus 1. So it just returned me previous count, and we are just incrementing the count. Oh, okay, so we just have created a class based component, and it should be outside of the class. Okay, so let's bind it. Okay, this dot handle click, and this will call the handle click method. So this will call handle click, and it would have this object. So we initially it won't know which object it is calling, so we will be explicitly binding it. This dot handle click should be this dot handle click dot bind function, and I will be binding it to this keyword. Okay, so let's start. So I have saved the file. Okay, click me, and I think it is fine. Let's try it out. mm. Example, example. Let's just say we should be writing example. Now it is returning example in, imported as example, but we do not have any module which has export because we didn't exported the module. So export, okay, export default example class. Okay, now it should work. Go to your UI, search for localhost 3000, and it is there. You clicked how many times? So it is coming error, error, error. So something is wrong with this. Let's find out what is wrong. Okay, functions are not validated React components. So if you return a component from render, or you may want it, then return it. I think we didn't return it, so let's go and find out what is our problem. Okay, this sound fine. I called this dot handle click, which is totally wrong. So this dot, you may have find it out the mistake. So uh, this would be the your current state. What is the count object, and this will be the on click property. On click property, this dot handle click, and now it should work fine. So let's close this out and try to 1 2 3 4 5 6. So it is showing another error. Okay, so to investigate it, we have to know what is happening over here. So we are calling the this state dot count. We are setting the state, all those things we are doing. We have done everything is fine. Okay, we have done everything, it should be fine. Okay, we are calling this on click handle as well, this dot handle click as well. Okay, so here's the problem, like something went wrong. We have to investigate what is going on. So I know like what we have done wrong. We are calling previous state. Previous state is like this object. We are calling the object and assigning an object and adding it one. Okay, so what I mean is like basically this is an object. Okay, count is an object. Okay, so previous state would be like count 0. So what we are doing here is like we are just adding 1 to this particular object, so which is wrong, right? So we just have to add it to the object's property, which will be the count object and plus 1. And let's go browse and click 1 2 3 4 5. So this was like class based component. So let me just comment it out, and let's start with the function based components. Okay, like how to create a function based components. So functional state components, like here we, it's very simple. Okay, let me just uncomment this line. Okay, no, let's start it from the scratch as well. Import react from react. Okay, let's say function, my function is example. I will calling a set state, constant state, use state, which I am defining as use state object. Let me just call it, let's just make call it should use state. Okay, use state, I am saying it as 0, initial value is 0. Okay, so what we will do is now, like we shouldn't use like these are the reserved keyword. Okay, so the VS Code is complaining about this one, so we will just say it count, and this will be the set count. Okay, so how we need to, we will also need to return something. So return what I want to return. It will have some div. I will just copy. No, let's just write it out. You clicked function based component, function based components, and I will just give button click me. Just let's put some handlers over here now. So handle click. So it would it is a function. Let's just use an arrow function. Let's say what is happening. So I'm saying set count dot set count. I'm calling the state, I'm calling the count object, I'm calling count object, and plus one. Set count and count as a function, and it is returning count plus one. How it is happening? Because we have structured the data. So destructuring we is used to perform here. Okay, so it is calling on a variable itself. So we are using handle click is not defined. So how to define it? Handle click constant handle click, you can write it as function. Okay, or either you can do this or that. Okay, so I am using the set count variable and I am incrementing it. Now let's just find it out. So you function based component clicked these many times, and I'm using the functional based component, and which will be on click handler, and I'm using that handle click property, and that would be fine. Since I haven't imported anything, so export default example. Okay, some error came, some bracket. Okay, so it is 6 function click 0 1 2 3 4 5 6. It is clicked. So we can so we should compare it. So this syntax is very clear. We just have created a simple function. We have extracted our state into these two variable count and set count, and we are just calling with the handle click and everything. Whereas in functional based components we have to call the constructor, we have to use this keyword and all those bind everything. So there was like very much confusing, like binding operations and all those things, confusing syntax, all those things. So I would prefer like a mix of these, like sometimes function based components, sometimes class based components. Is basically upon your need. So thanks for watching, guys. So please subscribe to my channel and give me your full support. Thank you.